It's the bad wigs. That's the problem. Video over. No, despite the negative title of this video, my goal isn't going to be to pick a live action or two and pick them apart and complain about them for 30 minutes. My goal is to take 4 live actions that I've seen, specifically the 4 that you saw in this thumbnail, and try to discuss what fails oftentimes in live actions, what works, and talk about what the broader problem is and what could potentially be the solution. Maybe it's because I'm new to the live action world as traditionally a novel reader who sees adaptations from a novel to a movie or TV series, and now I'm watching something that was once an anime, usually, and manga, and now it's being adapted to a live action, so it's a whole new ballgame, so maybe it's my naivete, but generally I find myself not being quite so hard on live action as the wider internet tends to be, except for live actions like Fullmetal Alchemist where it's just like a meme. It's just a meme, basically, and I love it for that. But I tend to be more forgiving to live actions than I tend to see the wider internet being, primarily because I love discussing my favorite series, and if my favorite series is getting an adaptation, then I think it's fun to find a new reason to discuss something that I love, except that they're almost always bad. So today I wanted to make a short video talking about why adaptations typically fail and what we can learn from it. And no, it's not just because of the wigs, but also could we maybe get better wigs? There's a lot of small but consistent things that fail in live actions, one being the pacing. Trying to cram 61 episodes into 8 episodes of a live action, or 20 episodes of a cartoon into 8 episodes of a live action automatically is going to present its own challenges. That's incredibly difficult to take a story that's meant to be more episodic with an overarching theme and plot that explores many, many things and then try to make it work into the Netflix, assuming it's a Netflix adaptation, which they tend to be, into a Netflix standard restriction is tremendously difficult, and it will mess with the pacing, and it will mess with how much can be explored, just inherently. But then you also have certain adaptations that try to be different while also still the same, like Fullmetal Alchemist trying to do the anime faces and mannerisms, even though this isn't an anime, so it just comes off as very creepy. Or very easy to fix issues like costumes that look like costumes instead of real worn clothing. All of these things are little issues that would be easy to fix in future live action adaptations, but I think that the main core issue that causes live action so often to fail is that so many live actions seem to miss what makes the series special. It takes the main components of the series, like the characters, maybe even possibly sometimes every now and then their mannerisms and the core plot points, but misses the spark, the magic of what makes the series great and what makes people actually fall in love with it. And since I've already picked on the wigs a couple of times, we'll start off the video talking about Fullmetal Alchemist live action. Fullmetal Alchemist is a story set in a time of war, and it follows 2 brothers that lose their mother and are willing to do what it takes to get her back. But we quickly learn that our choices have consequences, and that when you do try to change fate, it costs something huge. From the start, we're introduced to one of the core lessons our characters will be wrestling with, as well as the magic system that we'll be using. It's a story of brotherhood, resilience, the value of human life, the hardships of war, the cycles of violence, morality, sacrifice, and so much more. It's an incredibly emotional story, and each volume or episode forces the characters into difficult physical challenges, as well as moral questions that they have to wrestle with. And we, the readers, have to wrestle with them. It's incredible. But the live action instead felt like a string of highlights with very little connective tissue. When I was watching this live action, I just kept thinking, this wouldn't make sense if I hadn't already seen or read the original, because the motivations of these characters aren't being shown on screen. It seems like the live action is relying on us to already have all the information, and it's just trying to kind of show our greatest moments, our favorite scenes, our favorite characters, trying to show it in a different format without actually making that format have any sort of connective tissue. It felt like a highlight reel with no ability to stand on its own. And because of that, it felt hollow. It didn't actually hold any of the emotional weight that these scenes that were remade in some cases, every now and then, in a decent way, and could have held some emotional weight, but it didn't because it didn't do any work to actually have those emotional stakes. And part of it is because it tried to take so much story and cram it into a 2-hour slot. And that kind of harkens back to the pacing issues that a lot of live actions have, because most anime series should be adapted to TV series, not a movie. So it's just not given the time to be able to actually develop these characters, to develop their internal emotional struggle and the themes that the live action is trying to piggyback off of aren't actually being explored in the live action. It's just banking on you bringing those with you to the story, but that's not the way it works. Like I said, the Fullmetal Alchemist adaptation had plenty of problems, and I love it for that because it's so funny. But the main issue to me was that it just felt like it was just showing us the greatest hits of the series without actually developing anything, without actually making it so that it can have any sort of emotional weight if you don't already know all the background from the original. And then we're left with, then why do it? And I think Avatar: The Last Airbender live action, the most recent one, felt similar. Well, I think there's plenty that the live action did do that worked, like mainly the Fire family, it too felt distinctly strung together. Now, I do think that they did an okay job of stringing 20 mini plot lines into 8 cohesive episodes, which is not an easy task. And some of the combined plot lines did work. Like doing the Jet plot line side by side with the Mechanist. It wasn't perfect, but I didn't mind it. But the series really did feel like it was held together by glue in parts. Like, one of my biggest complaints about Avatar: The Last Airbender live action is that they stripped all the characters of any of their flaws. Aang didn't abandon everyone. In fact, he was just trying to clear his head and he got caught up in the storm and whoopsie. But he wasn't negligent. He didn't run away. He wasn't a kid that was unprepared for this incredible burden on his shoulders. He just needed to clear his head because a lot was going on. Yet the series kept acting as if he did. Like, I can pardon people like Bumi being mad at him for abandoning responsibility, because what does Bumi know? Bumi wasn't there. He wasn't a part of this plotline. All he can do is infer. That's all most of the world can do. All they know is that the air nomads were slaughtered and the Avatar disappeared when the world needed him most. They don't know the context around why he disappeared. No one does. Fair enough. You can draw your assumptions and that would be reasonable. But why is Kyoshi being so mean? She's literally an extension of you. She's coming from within you. She should know your motivations, and why don't you ever speak up and actually explain what happened? Or when Bumi tells Aang to quit playing games and get serious, when the live action Avatar is very serious. He's very focused. He has the burden of the world on his shoulders. He has tremendous regret for failing his people, and he reminds the camera regularly, looks directly into the lens and reminds us regularly that he's still carrying this burden on his shoulders. So why is Bumi looking at the live action Aang and speaking to the cartoon Aang? Like, you changed Aang so that he doesn't have this flaw, but then you're still treating him like he has this flaw. Same with Sokka, where they wanted to eliminate his sexism because it didn't age well, and so instead he still learns from Suki, but this time it's like this flirty scene instead of him humbling himself and wanting to learn from a woman and realizing that women shouldn't be shoved aside and not treated as warriors and not treated as worthy standing next to him in this fight, and that he can learn something from them. Instead, he's just learning because he likes her and they're flirting. Or Katara, whose bossiness and perfectionism are removed from her character, so no longer does she get so in her head about needing to master this element that she ends up snapping at her friends and her family. Instead, she just is a master because girl boss and yay strong female protagonist. It takes the bones of what these characters were, but it misses the point of what connects viewers to their stories. It takes their appearance and some of their baseline attributes, but removes all the complexity that makes us care about them, that makes us really truly invested in seeing them grow and change and actually overcome the obstacles that this world has for them. And you can feel the same problem in the spirit world as well, like sidelining Heibei's story and the lessons that Aang learns through it, and instead just kind of putting the owl spirit into the spirit realm because he's a loved character, and so we have to see him, and he does look great, but also, what are you doing here? It just all feels like it's held together by string, rather than a story of people who are doing their best in the midst of a 100-year war, and a kid who doesn't want the responsibility of the world on his shoulders, but learns to step into that role and figure out how best to do it according to his own sense of justice, rather than following the path of those before him, as well as following the story of his friends while they go through their own unique arcs as well, and holding each other up while they fight together. Then there's Death Note, which has Light, a character who finds a death note, a notebook dropped by a god who was bored and just wanted to see what would happen if this notebook that holds the power of people's life and death in his hands, what would happen if it landed in the hands of a human? And then we have Light, this complex character who at first wants to do what's right, wants to take out those that are evil in the world, but that power conflicts with his character and messes with him and changes him. And then we have this Light, who is this genius character, this incredibly smart character who's always thinking ahead and who always has a plan. And the live action really wants us to believe that he's still a genius. All the while, Light is not wanting to read the rules, bringing the book out in crowds anytime he can, explaining the book to the first pretty girl that talks to him, admitting he's Kira, and everyone being 5 steps ahead of him at every turn, to include his random girlfriend. Same for L. The writing also had the character doing a ton of stuff that seemed so reckless, like having the most important person in the world to him walk around showing his face and using his real name. All the while, L is antagonizing Light to come and get him, which makes the person that he cares about more than anything the biggest target and liability in the world. And then he still manages to freak out when he realizes that his loved one was targeted, as if that never crossed his mind. This was supposed to be a game of cat and mouse between 2 major geniuses, and instead it was this. And I could go into a bunch of rules that they instituted in the live action and then immediately broke those same rules, and just in general, the Death Note live action kind of just didn't make a lot of sense, but that's not the point of this video. The point of this video is to kind of talk about the reason why these live actions, I think, from my perspective, are failing so often. And I think that the main reason is because so many live actions seem to grab a hold of character names and a couple personality traits and plot points and general plot threads, but miss the core of what makes the story so special. And I think most viewers will forgive the occasional inconsistency in the story or suspension of disbelief, but when you take something like Light and L and their unique characters and their unique character dynamic, and you can completely strip those characters of those things but still give us the basic plot points, what do we have left? And I guess that's my main point in this video, is the thing that makes the series special oftentimes is the thing that's missed. Which leads us to talking about One Piece. The One Piece live action is not perfect. It has its fair share of flaws, some of which even match some of the complaints I listed in this video when discussing other series. One of those things being that this world just doesn't seem big enough to me. One of the things that makes Arlong Park so special is the role that Nami's village plays in her story. It's in the reveal that they knew the whole time and they've been keeping it a secret so that she could leave at any point she wanted, and then holding her, the governor showrunner holding her and telling her, "You must be so tired. Let us fight for you once." A big part of what makes One Piece so special is that the world is so living and breathing, that there's so many people with individual stories that play a part in the grander story. And it's not just our main character interacting with islands, but it's islands with their own identities that have their own stories that our Straw Hats encounter and attempt to help. And the live action is missing that because, once again, of the 8-episode structure. You can only do so much. But I think fans forgive that because of all the things that it does so well. Like when it has to skip over certain things for time-wise, like Shushu, it still shows him next to the mayor at Orangetown. Or like when Buggy mentions his dancing lion. They have to skip over certain things because of time, but they mention them to us as a reminder that they know and they care. Even though the series is forced to skip over certain things, it still emphasized themes like pursuing one's dream, the significance of legacy, passing on one's will and dreams, the value of companionship. Oda was deeply involved and mentioned that there were times where he didn't think the live action was going to work because his vision didn't always match with the showrunner's vision, but the showrunners cared about making sure that Oda was happy with the final product. And so they worked together, they changed things, they made it work so that the creator said, yes, this represents my story. And I think that's essential for why the One Piece was a success in a land where it seemed like there was no such thing as a live action. There could be no such thing as a live action that's a success. And again, the One Piece live action is not perfect. I could list more things. I think the Garp plotline took way too much screen time when we could have been building out the world more, but that's probably a budgeting issue. They needed something where they could just kind of reuse the same sets over and over again rather than having to keep building out more sets. But viewers forgive these things because the heart of the story remained intact. The thing that made One Piece special, the sense of adventure, the companionship, the nakama, the wonder of this world, they stayed intact. And even major changes were made in One Piece. It's not like it was great because it was a one-to-one adaptation. Huge things were changed, not just that certain plot lines were cut, but one of the main characters went from being the biggest simp in the world to being super suave and making half the audience simp for him. And I think that the Sanji episodes were the best episodes in the adaptation because they were so loyal to the core of what Baratie was, while still making significant changes that made sense for the adaptation. So why did One Piece succeed when so many adaptations failed, despite also having its flaws? I think it comes down to the fact that so many adaptations take certain aspects of what makes the original stories recognizable without actually keeping the heart of what makes the stories something that we actually connect with. It takes the thing that the readers and the viewers say, wow, that makes this story special. And it throws that part out, but keeps the highlight reels or the major plot points. I just love the weightlessness of an animated story. You can capture so much beauty and emotion in a drawing and make magic seem wondrous and inspiring in a way that's just so much more limited in real life acting. Plus, boundaries can be pushed with things that are absurd or strange to us, but I can easily accept it if it's animated, whereas if it's the real world, my brain kind of has to fight this feels uncanny feeling, even though I know it's supposed to. Plus, it doesn't matter how good the acting is, I can never get out of the back of my head that I'm watching people acting. I can't sink into the story with real life actors the way I can with animation. That's just me, and I know that that's odd about me, so I don't blame people who kind of don't feel like they can connect with animation on the same level. But I do think that these series are originally made in animation because that's the format that works the best for them, and it's the format that makes the most sense to them, and it's so amazing in that format. But that's not to say that another format could never work, and I think that the One Piece live action is a great example of how it can work. Still be flawed, still not be as good as the original, but still be really, genuinely good. But again, the main thing is keeping the main thing the main thing. What was it that made this story special? And I think having Oda on set and consulting him with so much of the scripting and the characterization is a big part of what made One Piece stand out. But that's just my rambly thoughts. I would love to hear yours. Why do you think so many live actions fail? And what do you think is the core, the root issue that could potentially help us break this curse outside of One Piece? One Piece is a unicorn at this point. I do think that other series have the possibility of also being a good time as a live action. If you made it this far in this very rambly video, thanks. I would love to hear your thoughts. So please do share them in the comments. I'll see you again soon. Bye.